Imagine a volcano so powerful that it cooled the entire planet. A volcano that buried one of America's largest military bases, darkened skies thousands of kilometers away, and should have killed tens of thousands of people. Instead, more than 5,000 lives were saved. Not by luck, not by chance, but by a handful of scientists who had just 73 days to convince the world that a mountain everyone believed was dead was about to awaken. This is the incredible true story of Mount Pinatubo. April 2nd, 1991. The morning begins like any other on the slopes of Mount Pinatubo. A Filipino farmer walks through the dense rainforest, following a narrow dirt path he has traveled countless times before. Birds sing from the towering trees. The air is warm and humid. Nothing feels unusual. Then, he notices something that stops him in his tracks. A thin white column of steam rises silently through the jungle canopy. Not from a cooking fire, not from burning leaves, from the mountain itself. He stares in disbelief. His family has lived beneath Mount Pinatubo for generations. His father farmed these slopes. His grandfather hunted these forests. No one has ever seen the mountain breathe. The steam fades within minutes. Life returns to normal. But beneath his feet, nearly 20 kilometers underground, something enormous has begun to move. Within 73 days, Mount Pinatubo will unleash one of the largest volcanic eruptions of the 20th century. The explosion will send ash 40 kilometers into the sky, destroy entire towns, force hundreds of thousands of people to flee, and temporarily change Earth's climate. But on that quiet April morning, nobody knows any of this. For nearly 600 years, Mount Pinatubo had remained silent. Its last major eruption had occurred around the year 1450, long before the Industrial Revolution, long before modern science, long before anyone alive today had been born. Entire generations came and went believing the volcano was nothing more than another peaceful mountain. Unlike famous volcanoes, such as Mount Fuji or Mount Etna, Pinatubo attracted almost no attention. Dense tropical rainforest completely covered its slopes. From the air, it looked like an ordinary green mountain. Even many maps barely identified it as an active volcano. It simply blended into the surrounding landscape, and that made it incredibly dangerous. Volcanologists often say the most dangerous volcano isn't the one erupting every few years. It's the one that has slept for centuries. Because people forget, they build homes, schools, roads, entire cities. Eventually, they stop believing the volcano will ever wake up again. That's exactly what happened around Mount Pinatubo. More than 500,000 people live within 40 kilometers of the mountain. Farmers cultivated its fertile volcanic soil. Children walked to school beneath its forested slopes. Families built entire communities around a volcano they believed had become part of the landscape. No one imagined it was quietly rebuilding the pressure for one of history's greatest eruptions. Long before these farming communities appeared, another people had called Mount Pinatubo home. The Ida, one of the oldest indigenous communities in the Philippines. For thousands of years, they lived in harmony with the mountain. They hunted in its forests, collected wild fruits, gathered medicinal plants, and passed stories from one generation to the next. To outsiders, Pinatubo was simply a mountain. To the Ida, it was alive. It provided everything they needed to survive: food, water, shelter, and identity. Their knowledge wasn't written in books. It was passed from elders to children through countless generations. They understood the rhythms of the forest, the behavior of birds, the flow of rivers, the sounds of the mountain. When something changed, they noticed. And in early 1991, something had changed. Birds began disappearing from familiar nesting grounds. Small earthquakes shook the forests. Streams that had flowed the same way for generations suddenly turned cloudy. Animals wandered into villages in unusual numbers. Many Ida elders quietly reached the same conclusion. The mountain was trying to tell them something. They didn't know exactly what, but they knew enough to become worried. Ironically, the first people to sense danger weren't scientists with sophisticated instruments. They were people who had spent their entire lives listening to the mountain. 14 kilometers away, life couldn't have been more different. Clark Air Base. one of the largest American military installations anywhere in the world, home to more than 15,000 U.S. military personnel and their families. Every morning the base came alive. Fighter jets roared down the runway. Mechanics serviced aircraft. Children boarded school buses. Families shopped at supermarkets. Doctors worked in modern hospitals. Restaurants opened for breakfast. It was more than a military base. It was an entire American city built in the heart of the Philippines. For nearly 90 years, Clark had survived wars, political crises, and natural disasters. Nothing suggested that its greatest threat was quietly waiting beneath a mountain only 14 kilometers away, far below the forests, far beneath the villages, far beneath the airbase. Molten rock was rising toward the surface, and every passing day, the pressure inside Mount Pinatubo grew stronger. The countdown had already begun. 73 days remained. By the middle of March 1991, Mount Pinatubo had begun whispering. At first, the signs were almost impossible to notice. Tiny earthquakes, so small that many people mistook them for passing trucks or distant explosions. But they kept coming, not once a day, not once an hour, sometimes dozens of times in a single day. Deep beneath the volcano, rock was breaking apart. Molten magma was forcing its way upward through cracks that had remained sealed for 6 centuries. Every fracture sent tiny shockwaves through the mountain. To local residents, the earthquakes were unsettling. To volcanologists, they were a warning. The Philippine Institute of Volcanology and Seismology, better known as PHIVOLCS, immediately dispatched a team to Mount Pinatubo. Leading the effort was Dr. Raimundo Pinongbayan, one of the Philippines' most respected volcanologists. His scientists carried portable seismometers, notebooks, radios, and equipment designed to answer one critical question. Was the mountain simply releasing pressure, or was it preparing to erupt? At first, nobody knew. Pinatubo had no modern eruption history. No living scientist had ever studied it. There were no photographs, no scientific measurements, no eyewitness accounts. The volcano was a mystery. Then, on April 2nd, everything changed. A violent steam explosion blasted open the mountainside. Columns of ash and steam shot nearly 2 kilometers into the sky. The explosion lasted only minutes, but it proved something terrifying. Heat from rising magma had reached groundwater. The sleeping giant had officially awakened. News spread quickly across nearby villages. Residents gathered outside their homes, looking toward the mountain. Many had never seen anything like it. Some believed it would end there. Others quietly packed their belongings. The Ida people didn't wait. Their elders had seen enough. Entire families began leaving the higher slopes, not because the government told them to, because the mountain had. Within days, scientists climbed the volcano itself. The journey was exhausting. Steep jungle trails, thick tropical heat, equipment carried entirely by hand. Every kilogram mattered. Every instrument could mean the difference between understanding the volcano or guessing. New seismometers were installed around the mountain. Gas monitoring stations measured sulfur dioxide escaping from underground. Tilt meters searched for tiny changes in the mountain's shape. Even a few centimeters of swelling could reveal magma rising beneath the surface. Every morning, the scientists collected new data. Every evening, they compared results. The pattern became harder to ignore. Earthquakes were increasing. Gas emissions were rising. The mountain was slowly expanding. Each piece of evidence pointed toward the same conclusion. Pressure was building. But another problem quickly became obvious.
USGS, this is PHIVOLCS. Pinatubo is escalating. We need your satellite imaging immediately.
Marking the new vent position here.
It's 2 kilometers west of the summit.
Copy USGS. We'll send the updated report now.
PHIVOLCS was facing one of the largest volcanic crises in Philippine history, and they simply didn't have enough specialized equipment. They needed more instruments, more experts, more experience studying giant explosive volcanoes. There was only one organization in the world with exactly that experience. The United States Geological Survey. The USGS had spent decades studying volcanoes across Alaska, Hawaii, and especially Mount St. Helens. Only 11 years earlier, in May 1980, Mount St. Helens had produced America's deadliest volcanic eruption in modern history. 57 people died. Entire forests were flattened. Scientists learned painful lessons about predicting explosive eruptions. Now, those lessons would be tested again, nearly 9,000 kilometers away. Within days, a small USGS team landed in the Philippines. Leading them was volcanologist Ed Wolf. Joining him were specialists including John Ewart, Chris Newhall, Tom Harlow, Andy Lockhart, and several others whose expertise covered everything from seismic monitoring to volcanic gases. They arrived carrying crates of instruments, portable seismometers, gas analyzers, computers, satellite communication equipment, everything needed to monitor a volcano that had been silent longer than most modern nations had existed. One common goal: understand the mountain before it was too late. The most important clue came from an invisible gas: sulfur dioxide. Fresh magma contains enormous amounts of dissolved sulfur. As it rises toward Earth's surface, pressure decreases. The gas escapes, like bubbles leaving a bottle of soda after it's opened. The more sulfur dioxide released, the closer magma usually is to the surface. When scientists measured Pinatubo's emissions, the numbers shocked them. Thousands of tons, every single day. Fresh magma wasn't simply moving underground. It was rising rapidly. Then, the mountain itself began changing shape. Tiny measurements showed that the volcano was swelling, almost like a balloon slowly being inflated from within. To most people, the change was invisible. To volcanologists, it was unmistakable. Magma was pushing upward, stretching the mountain from the inside. The pressure was increasing, and nature rarely allows pressure to build forever. Eventually, something has to give. Still, predicting exactly when a volcano will erupt remains one of Earth's greatest scientific challenges. Scientists cannot simply look at a graph and announce, "It will erupt next Tuesday." Volcanoes don't follow calendars. Some produce warning signs for years, then return to sleep. Others explode with almost no warning at all. Every decision carried enormous consequences. If they ordered evacuations too early, people might lose trust. If they waited too long, thousands could die. The scientists weren't just studying a volcano anymore. They were making decisions that could determine the fate of entire communities.
The alert level is rising. We must expand Zone 1 evacuations. Our models show pyroclastic flows could hit
The communities are reluctant. We need to show them the photos.
Agreed. Time is short.
And every new earthquake, every new gas reading, every new measurement made one thing increasingly clear. Mount Pinatubo wasn't going back to sleep. The science was becoming clear. The challenge now was convincing everyone else. PHIVOLCS and the USGS knew they were running out of time. But issuing an evacuation order wasn't as simple as sounding an alarm. More than 75,000 people lived around Mount Pinatubo. Entire towns, schools, hospitals, and Clark Air Base lay within reach of one of the most dangerous volcanoes on Earth. A false alarm could destroy public trust for years, but waiting too long could cost thousands of lives. The responsibility resting on the scientists' shoulders was enormous. Every recommendation had to be backed by evidence. Every warning had to be credible. Every decision could mean the difference between life and death. As the volcanic alert level increased, emergency meetings became a daily routine. Scientists briefed government officials, military commanders, and local leaders, explaining exactly what could happen if Mount Pinatubo produced a major eruption. Hazard maps were revised. Danger zones expanded. Evacuation routes were finalized. But convincing people to leave remained the hardest task of all. Many families had lived beneath Pinatubo for generations. The mountain had never erupted in anyone's lifetime. Some believed the warnings were exaggerated. Others simply couldn't abandon their homes, their farms, or their livestock. Then, the volcano delivered another unmistakable warning. The character of the earthquakes suddenly changed.
The seismographs are off the charts! We must order the evacuation now!
Hurry, we have to leave right now!
Everyone must evacuate immediately.
Scientists began detecting harmonic tremors, continuous vibrations created by magma forcing its way upward through the volcano. For volcanologists, this was one of the clearest signs yet. The eruption was approaching. There was no more time to wait. Evacuation orders were finally issued. Military trucks rolled into nearby villages. Buses filled with anxious families began leaving the danger zone. Many carried only a few belongings. Some turned back for one last look at the mountain. It still looked peaceful, still covered in lush rainforest, still giving no hint of the unimaginable force building beneath its surface. But within days, Mount Pinatubo would unleash one of the largest eruptions of the 20th century. The first magmatic eruption came on June 7, 1991. For weeks, scientists had watched Mount Pinatubo awaken. Now, there was no doubt. Fresh magma had finally reached the surface. Dark columns of ash climbed thousands of meters into the sky. The eruption itself was still relatively small.
This confirms it.
But it confirmed every
Fresh
warning
magma.
the scientists had given. There would be no turning back. Over the next several days, the volcano became increasingly violent. Ash clouds rose higher. Explosions became more frequent. Each eruption was stronger than the last. Every new explosion pushed thousands more people to safety. By June 10th, the United States ordered the evacuation of Clark Air Base. Military aircraft filled the skies. Families boarded transport planes, carrying only what they could hold. Within days, more than 15,000 American personnel and their families had left the base. It was one of the largest military evacuations in the region since the Vietnam War. But the volcano still wasn't finished. On June 12th, the anniversary of Philippine independence, Mount Pinatubo produced another powerful eruption. Ash rose nearly 20 kilometers into the atmosphere. Pyroclastic flows thundered down the mountainside. Entire valleys disappeared beneath clouds of scorching ash and gas. Scientists knew the worst was still to come. Then, on June 15, 1991, it happened. At 1:42 in the afternoon, Mount Pinatubo unleashed one of the largest volcanic eruptions of the 20th century. The mountain exploded with unimaginable force. A towering eruption column blasted more than 35 kilometers into the stratosphere. Millions of tons of ash, rock, and volcanic gas were hurled high above the earth. Day turned into night. Ash began falling across Central Luzon. Entire cities disappeared beneath darkness. People switched on headlights in the middle of the afternoon. Many believed the end of the world had arrived. At the same time, nature delivered another devastating blow. Typhoon Yunya passed directly across northern Luzon. Heavy rain mixed with volcanic ash, creating a thick, cement-like slurry. Roofs that had survived the eruption began collapsing under the enormous weight. Entire neighborhoods were buried. Power lines failed. Roads vanished beneath ash. Communication with many communities was lost. Meanwhile, pyroclastic flows raced down the slopes of Mount Pinatubo at incredible speeds. Everything in their path was destroyed. Forests disappeared. Rivers were buried. Entire landscapes were transformed within minutes. Yet, despite the unimaginable destruction, one extraordinary fact stood above everything else. The scientists had been right, because PHIVOLCS and the USGS had acted early, because government officials trusted the science, and because tens of thousands of people evacuated before the main eruption. Countless lives were saved. The eruption claimed hundreds of lives, with many deaths caused by collapsing ash-laden roofs and later lahars. Without the evacuation, the death toll could have reached many thousands more. But Mount Pinatubo's story did not end in the Philippines. Nearly 20 million tons of sulfur dioxide entered the stratosphere. The gas spread around the globe. Tiny sulfate particles reflected sunlight back into space. Over the next 2 years, Earth's average temperature fell by about 0.5 degrees Celsius. It was the largest global cooling caused by a volcanic eruption in the satellite era. Today, where the summit once stood, a beautiful crater lake fills the massive caldera left behind by the eruption. The forests have slowly returned. Communities have rebuilt, but the lessons of Mount Pinatubo continue to shape modern volcano monitoring around the world. It proved that science cannot stop a volcano, but it can give people something just as valuable: time. And sometimes, time is enough to save thousands of lives. The 1991 eruption of Mount Pinatubo remains one of history's greatest examples of how science, international cooperation, and timely evacuation transformed a potential catastrophe into one of the most successful volcanic disaster responses ever recorded. Thank you for watching.